Hi, thanks for joining us. It's so good to have you all here. Thanks for logging in from wherever you are. You may see that we are recording this. So Pamela Druckerman is here with me, logging in from her home in Paris. Hi, Pamela.
Hi, Celeste.
So great to have you here. I'm logging in from the library in the 7th. I'm very glad to see some familiar faces on screen. You won't show up in the video. We are recording this so that we can share the reading because Pamela is going to be reading her picture book and I'll be experiencing it for the first time. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see this and hear it from her. We will have time for questions at the end. So if you do have questions, you can feel free to type them in the chat box throughout the reading and I'll get to them at the end. Or you can type them in when we open up questions with Pamela. I'll read all of our questions to her and we can have a chat about the creation of her first picture book. Many of you probably know Pamela as the author of Bringing Up Bébé, also known as French Kids Don't Throw Food. And she's the author of many books and a journalist. She's an experienced writer. So many ways, but this is her first picture book. So I'm very excited to experience this with you. Pamela, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Celeste, for having me. As you well know, I am a huge fan of the American Library in Paris, so I'm very happy to be here, even virtually.
Thank you. So we'll show a little video about the library at the very end of this. As I said, I see many familiar faces, so I don't think I need to tell many of you who we are, but very briefly, we're an independent nonprofit, and we're very excited to welcome authors from all over the world who write in English, including Pamela, American authors, British authors, many authors of children's books and adult books, and both. So we're happy to do some events virtually in these strange times. And we can sometimes see into people's homes like today, which is exciting. So I'd like to get us started today by asking you to tell us a little bit about why you wanted to write a children's book and what inspired you. And then perhaps we can take a look.
Just from a purely administrative standpoint, after Bringing Up Bébé came out, a children's book editor approached me and asked if I'd be interested in writing a children's book, to which I said, oh my God, so much so. I've dreamt my whole life of writing a children's book because I love rhyme. Even though my normal journalism is like sort of official, traditional journalism, I've always been the person who, like, when it's your birthday, I write a song to the tune of New York, New York about your whole life. And my mom's birthday is coming up and I have to write a new song for her. So I don't know what it is, but I just love doing that. I love musicals. You know, in a different life, I would be somebody who wrote kind of comedic musicals. I love that. I actually still dream of doing that. So I was really excited about this. But then then came the question of, like, what do I actually write this children's book about? I knew it was going to be a rhyming picture book. And my daughter, who's on this call, so I hope she won't get mad at me for saying this, said, I had an argument with her and she got really mad at me. I think it was about bedtime. It was when she was really small. And she said, I'm really mad at you. I'm going to pick up this phone and whoever answers, that's going to be my mother. She just said that spontaneously. And it made me think of a few things. One is how we're really stuck with our families where, you know, even though they're wonderful places, we're trapped in everything that comes with them, where we live, who our parents are, what their histories are. And also that the modern escape from all that is the phone. That's the way out. So I thought, what about a journey through a kind of magic phone? And then where would my daughter go, or this fictional little girl go? And I thought, well, I live in Paris. I think many people on this call probably live in Paris. And Paris is the place that, you know, we take it for granted. We live here, it's normal for us, but people around the world are fascinated by Paris. And it's, you know, whether they're in America or Russia or Canada or Argentina, they think, everything would be perfect if I only lived in Paris. So I wanted to play with that idea, with that trope, and see where it took us. And then we had to find an illustrator, and we ended up finding this amazing French illustrator. I don't know if anyone's read the Pamela books, but he did those with the pink elephant with the long nose. Has anybody read this? I see some people nodding. So it's Benjamin Chaud. He lives in sort of rural France, and he agreed to do it. So it was just an amazing combination, because for him, he doesn't live in Paris. So for him, Paris is really exciting and exotic too.
That's really neat. I love hearing about your inspiration. It's not what I would have expected. It coincides so well right now because I know a lot of the kids on this call are thinking about writing stories for a Young Authors Fiction Festival. And it just goes to show that inspiration can come from anywhere.
It can come from an argument you have with your mom and dad even.
Yeah, exactly. So great to hear a little bit more about where it came from. And so the process of working with the illustrator, I imagine, was more exciting, knowing that you shared this excitement about the city.
Yeah, it was fantastic. The thing that's amazing about a children's book is, you don't just have the words, you also have the pictures. So you can play on the juxtaposition, the combination of those two things. So when I wrote the text for the book and the text was done, and then Benjamin drew all the pictures, and we ended up cutting probably, I don't know, a quarter of the words, because so many of the things that I was saying, he had put in the pictures, or he had made them so much better. He had added little jokes in the pictures. You can see they're very detailed, very intricate, with lots of details about Paris. There's chouquettes in the book. Please be on the lookout for the chouquettes. That was Benjamin. They're croissant. Another thing that I really wanted there to be in the book was a lot of French words, but not too many to scare away kids who don't speak French, but just enough to teach the kids who don't speak any French. And I thought, I grew up in Miami, where lots and lots of people speak Spanish. And I grew up hearing so many Spanish words. So when I went to study Spanish, it wasn't that foreign. I already knew I'd heard people go, mira, mira, or something. So I wanted to do that with French, so that French, just words that for those of us who live in Paris are really basic and really easy, start to become familiar to kids who don't speak French.
Yeah. So you said that we should be on the lookout for chouquette, which are, of course, the standard snack food. What else should we be on the lookout for as you read this book? And is there anything else that you specifically put in that we should try and spot?
Okay, so one of my favorite places in Paris with kids are the trampolines in the Tuileries Gardens. Has anyone in the audience jumped on those trampolines ever? Do we have kids who are Parisians? They're in-ground trampolines. You buy a ticket and you get about 4 or 5 minutes to jump as many times as you can. So I wanted those to be in the book. Although the way they're drawn in the book, it looks like they're above ground because it was too hard to draw in-ground trampolines. Another thing I really wanted to be in the book, I wanted her to have an experience of like eating something crazy that for her was she would never eat at home. So I chose oysters because I think they are really everywhere in Paris when they're in season. And so be on the lookout for oysters.
That's a nice change from the typical snails that we see in books about Paris, I think.
Yeah, I mentioned snails, but I went for the oysters because I actually don't like snails at all. And even though my kids love snails, they'll eat them whenever they're on the menu. And what else? Oh, another thing that I thought was so Parisian, but that I don't really see in books about Paris, are the tiny elevators in the Parisian buildings. So I wanted there to be a really teeny tiny elevator that she could squeeze into.
Neat. I can't wait to see them all. So now I'm just very curious to see the book. Are you ready to do a reading for us?
I am. Let's see if I can call it up. It's called Paris by Phone. This is the whole cover. And then you see a picture of Benjamin as well. Josephine Harris really likes Paris. In France, the kids eat chocolate rolls and take their poodles out for strolls. They stay up late to roast their snails and send each other French emails. At dinner, Joe says, "Mommy, please, the French would never call this cheese." That's supposed to be macaroni and cheese. "And really, Mother, what's the use of life without some chocolate mousse?" Her mom, who has a deadline soon, says, "Josephine, go to your room." Mommy, you're mean and you're not a good mother. I'll pick up this phone and I'll find me another. The phone beeps and it rings, it totters and tones, it screeches and scratches and rattles and moans. Joe drifts off to a distant shore, then hears a voice that says, Bonjour. When she opens her eyes, she is in a new room with an elegant lady who smells of perfume. From the red of her lips to the beige of her sweater, she's like Josephine's mother, but quite a bit better. Now I'm going to do my bad French accent, so forgive me. Josephine, ma chérie, we're so glad that you've come. My name is Odile du Château du French Bun. Let's get you dressed and we'll go have some fun. A little boy who's named Pierre gives Josephine a cold French stare. What are you doing with my mère? Pierre, be polite and get off the bench. Let's show Josephine how to be French. A cat is a chat, and no is non, and on y va means, come on, let's go. In gardens built for kings and queens, French children jump on trampolines. And when they're done, they shout, encore. In French, that means, we want some more. Josephine can't help but smile. Even the joggers run with style. They look at art, then watch ballet, and Jo receives her first beret. And she goes to the ballet. Odile, Pierre, this is so cool, but don't you go to work and school? Welcome to the nation that is always on vacation. I don't know if you can see that girl in the blue sweater up there above Odile, but I'm pretty sure that's me. At least I like to think that's me. To have the proper Paris day, we must eat oysters in a cafe. Odile, pardon, I hate to be petty, but could I please just have some spaghetti? To grow your little appetite, I do insist you take a bite. So she eats it. Jo loves the oyster. It tastes like the sea. Pierre says, now you're French like me. But Jo wishes that her mom could see. Just then, Odile says, look at the hour. We still have time for the Eiffel Tower. And then Odile says, the perfect city through and through. It's obviously meant for you. Stay here with Pierre and me. You'll be so chic, so French, so free. All that you need to say is oui. And then Jo says, thank you for this Paris day, but I don't think that I can stay. There's someplace else where I belong. I miss my house, my room, my mom. Jo gives Pierre and Odile a bisou and tells the little cat adieu. The phone crackles and crizzles and sizzles and swaps. It guzzles and gizzles and rizzles and rups. As Jo's voyage starts to slow, she wakes up to her mom's hello. In Paris, I had my own brother, Pierre. A trampoline sent us high in the air. I even had a real French mère. The one thing wrong was you weren't there. Paris is perfect. I hated to part, but home is the place. They know you by heart. Though when she spots her phone, Jo thinks, next time, Rome. That's it.
That was lovely. Thank you so much. It's so cool to see it. And I have to say, it's really neat to see those details you pointed out. I noticed too the advertisements in the little pillars that are so different from anywhere else. It sure must have been great to work with a French illustrator when you know the city so well and had particular things you wanted included.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that, Americans we looked at some American illustrators who are wonderful, but I think they see Paris in a particular way. It's hard not to because it's such an iconic city. So I thought somebody who was, first of all, just French illustrators have their own sensibility, and I thought it would bring something different to the book. But I also thought he would see details of Paris that an American someone who wasn't French wouldn't necessarily see.
Yeah. I was curious to see how it was going to turn out when she wanted spaghetti, whether she would like those oysters. That's a nice touch too, and a little reminiscent of some things you mentioned in your other works about children trying things for the first time here. It seems like you incorporated a few things that you mentioned in bringing up Baby.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want the book to be too didactic. It wasn't meant to teach lessons. It was meant to be playful and adventurous. But I did want to get in that French rule, which everybody who lives in France knows, which is you don't have to eat everything, but you definitely have to taste it. You have to take a little bit of everything. And that's how you learn to like all kinds of foods and you don't get stuck just eating what we call kids' foods.
Yeah. And it was sweet to see her desire to go experience being with mom and showing her mom. It was a lovely, lovely story. And what does your daughter think of it?
She's on the call. She has read, I actually don't know what her final conclusion is, but I know that she got tired of reading endless versions of it. Because the thing about a kid's book, I mean, this book, normally I write books that are 300 pages with no pictures. This book is 32 pages with very few words, but they have to be exactly the right words. It's like, it is like writing poetry. It is essentially a poem. And, this is my first one. I'm not an expert at doing this yet, but the process is all about cutting and reducing and making it kind of minimalist, but say as much as you can with as few words as possible. So anyway, to answer your question, I think my daughter got tired of reading different versions of it, and I eventually had to find different children to experiment on, including, I have two sons, so they had to read the book too. And I have a little niece who read many, who's now 10 years old, who read many, many, many versions of the book as well, and even gave me a suggestion for a rhyme that I ended up using at the very end of the book. So the book is dedicated to her as well as to my kids.
What's the rhyme that she suggested? Which one? Do you remember?
She suggested, it says, Paris is perfect, I hated to part, but home is the place where I know you by heart. So she suggested I hated to part because I needed a rhyme there. I love the French expression when you're very close friends with someone, you say, I know them by heart. Mm-hmm. We make sense in English, but it's not an expression in English. And I really wanted that to be in the book.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's a lovely ending. I love the rhymes, and it's so neat to hear how you're such a fan of rhyming and musical theater. I didn't know that about you. And it makes sense having heard the rhymes. So what pieces did you change or put in? I loved the words and the guzzles and sizzles bit with the telephone. That was lovely. Do you have some favorite rhymes, and what were some things that were changed? I'm always fascinated by the process of writing.
Definitely the in-ground trampoline was hard to show. There was a line that we took out. First we had a line where in the ballet scene where they're watching the ballet, which it was something like, as music plays, they're filled with awe, and all three whisper, "Oh la la," which I thought it was a little bit clunky, but it was kind of a nice rhyme. But the decision was made that the picture itself is so elegant and quiet that it actually takes something away to have text on the page. It's nice in children's books to have some pages where you're just quiet.
Yeah.
So I hear the lines when I look at that page sometimes, but and there was another part. There was a big debate about whether we could have the expression je ne sais quoi in the book, because while parents would know it, even non-French speaking parents, for kids it would be kind of a hard concept to explain. So, that we had a line toward the end where where they've just come from the Eiffel Tower and they're walking at dusk. And it said, I'm giving you all the outtakes now. It said, despite the lovely things she saw, Jo feels a certain je ne sais quoi. Which I don't know. I'd be interested what people think if their kids would have understood it, or if the kids in the audience think they would have understood it. But we cut that as well because it was a little too winky to parents and not accessible enough.
And that piece really did ring authentically to me when you read it, that she was missing her mom. I loved the way you did it. I can't remember the lines now, but the way it was in the book really worked too. But yes, kids and parents, feel free to type in whether you would have understood that line or liked it in the chat. We could do a little survey. We do have a first question here in the chat. So someone asks, well, first of all, they said thank you, and asks, are you planning a next book?
Another children's book?
So that's not specified. Just the next book.
But the general answer is yes. The specific answer is I'm not sure what it's going to be, but yes, I would love to do another book. People ask me fairly often if I'm planning to do a successor book to Bringing Up Bebe, like bringing up ados or teenagers, and I'm not. And it's partly because when my kids were tiny and the big issues were like getting them to sleep through the night or getting them to taste different foods, it was easy to write about them. They, were just starting to talk and all that. But now that they're teenagers and they're readers, and they can read what I write about them, it's tricky for privacy reasons to talk about the issues that they're going through now. And I try to give them as much privacy as possible. And also, I kind of want to move on to other things and not just write about what's happening in my own house. I like making stuff up like I did for this children's book. My last book was about middle age and going from mademoiselle to madame in France, and what that transition is like and what it feels like, which is really about me and my cohort rather than about my own family. I still do reserve the right to write about my husband. That I don't think I could ever stop. He gives me a lot of really good material.
Well, I mentioned to you as we were chatting before this event officially began that I discovered you here at the library in 2008 with your first book, Lust in Translation. And I am curious to know about how you progressed from writing a book that was so research-based across cultures into picture books and a memoir. There are definitely common themes. You're clearly really interested in exploring culture, right?
Yes, and I'm very interested in the differences between cultures and comparing them. I think even in this children's book, you see it's the American perspective arriving in France. And I think I'm very interested in what it means to be an American and all the things that you grow up with as an American that you take for granted, that you only realize are cultural when you leave the country. I think many of the people in the audience who are expats will have experienced that. And I'm still, even though I've lived in Paris now since 2004 at 17 years, I'm still discovering how American I am in different ways that I had never even thought of before. And it's, like I wrote about aging and I hadn't sort of realized there was a different approach to getting older in France. And but in every realm, in child rearing, of course, there's so many differences, but it's everywhere, it's all around. So to answer your question, sorry, I started out as a journalist, as a very straightforward, I worked for a newspaper, I was a foreign correspondent in Latin America. And so I wrote from the perspective of like an authoritative newspaper, which is, I know what's going on, here's the official story, let me tell you exactly what's happening. And so I did that for many years. I was like 6 or 7 years doing that kind of journalism. And it never felt right to me because I always felt like, how can I know what's really happening? It's so hard. It's so hard to know what the real story is. It's kind of arbitrary to just decide, okay, this is the headline. Sometimes it's clear, but oftentimes I just found it sort of baffling, and I would do it, but didn't feel it was like, I didn't think I was that good at it because I guess I lacked some kind of confidence, but also I was skeptical about the whole process. So I started writing in the first person. And once I did that, so from the I perspective, and once I did, I'm saying this not for the adults, but for the kids in the audience, if they're still listening. And once I started writing from the first person, I had I felt like I had much more access to what was really going on. You know, I wasn't trying to say, this is what's happening definitively in the world. I was just saying, these are the few things that I'm thinking and feeling and questioning and experiencing and enjoying. And that felt a lot more comfortable and more honest for me. And I got a much better response to it than I did to my articles about the sort of Argentinian debt crisis.
Mhm.
So I started doing that more in baby steps. Like first I wrote an article about learning how to samba in Brazil. And it was the first piece I'd ever written in the first person. And honestly, nobody read it except me, but I loved it. It was just about how hard it was and how I never really got there. And I started just being really honest about how bad I was at stuff and how challenging I found it to figure things out. And the more I wrote in that way, which was honest, just the more responses I got. So I kept doing it. So Lust in Translation, that book that you were talking about, wasn't really in the first person. It was more journalistic. But from there, I think I started writing more and more in the first person.
I think we can all relate to a lot of the experience you share, and it is true. It resonates with a reader when the writer is really sharing something that's true to them. I think that comes across in this picture book as well, in the instances where you see the mom sitting and trying to work at the computer made me think, oh, this must be something you drew straight from your life. And I think that's a very powerful way to write. We have another question here. So similarly to the previous one, how do you find inspiration for your next book? And how do you narrow down on a particular theme? Do you start with many ideas and then decide that some don't work until you find one that feels this is the one?
I honestly think it's like falling in love when you sort of meet someone and you're like, oh yeah, I'm home. This is my person. This is my thing. I shouldn't even talk about it because I don't want to like kill the magic, but I think that is how you pick an idea. But I think that intuition comes from something, and part of it is feeling that it's an idea with lots of tentacles in many directions. That's a rich idea, because for a book, even for a children's picture book, you're going to sit with that idea for many years as you're developing it, as you're trying to even just sell the idea as a book. And then as, of course, as you're working on it, and then as you're marketing it after, I mean, this is something you really have to, it's like a roommate or a love. I mean, you have to really feel that there's a depth of things to say and explore about that topic. I mean, because when you write a book proposal to your publisher, to a publisher, to say, I'd like to write a book about this. And then you describe what the whole book is going to be about and what the different chapters are. But at that point, you really have no idea what the book's going to say. You're just, if you get the green light and you start writing the book, then you have to go down all these different roads and figure out what the book is really going to look like. And you want to be surprised. You want there to be so much in so many different directions. And you want it to sort of crash into other topics that create kind of like really fertile new ideas. Like you want to just be really surprised by your topic. So I would say, just like you want to be surprised by somebody that you have dinner with, you don't want to get what you expect. So I really like not getting what I expect, but at the same time, I think I keep returning to common themes, like you mentioned about the cross-cultural idea. And I'm very interested, sorry, this is a long-winded answer, but I'm very interested in the idea, as you can see from this book, of the American in Paris specifically. And so I wanted to explore that also in this book. That was another theme.
And I'll thank you so much for answering our questions today. And thank you for the people who have already shared questions. Again, feel free to type them in because I'll just keep going otherwise. I have lots. And I mentioned before that we have so many writers here. Obviously, as a library, we really want to promote reading and we have so many readers, but the Young Authors Fiction Festival is a big part of what we do. We want to inspire creative writing. And it does seem as if a lot of kids who are starting out, whether they're 5 or 10 or 18, wonder how to get started. So it's interesting to think about that inspiration. And I do want to follow up on that last question. So you want to fall in love with your ideas, but how do you get your ideas sorted? How do you write down everything that you might want to write about until you feel that love, or
Oh, I'm just picking it up the one that's next to me. I carry around a notebook all the time. I bring it to the tennis court because I'm afraid that while I'm hitting a serve, I'm going to have a brilliant idea and then I'm going to forget it by the time I get home. So I keep it in my tennis bag and I just take notes all the time. Often, I find that often I have, when I'm catching up with a friend I haven't seen in a long time, or I have a work call, those people will say so many interesting things in the course of an hour and a half conversation. And most of them you forget because I don't know, maybe someone remembers every interesting thing they've heard, so I find that if I just take some notes, not in an intrusive way, like I'm not writing down people's personal secrets, but just things that they've said that struck me or that I feel like I could develop into something, I always write it down. I mean, people say that writers are vampires because they are just like constantly looking for information, for inspiration. And it's true. I mean, I think I'm probably like a very irritating person to invite to a dinner party because I run away from the table and I'm scribbling down notes. But I can't help it. That's just the way I'm constructed. And I think a lot of writers are that way. They don't want these beautiful morsels of ideas or humor, inspiration to just disappear. They want to use them somehow.
We've heard that before, and definitely. I have a colleague who said David Sedaris once wrote some notes down after an event when they were talking, and it made her very uncomfortable.
Yes.
But writers have to do it. Would you encourage your own kids to carry around a notebook and keep ideas? Would you encourage young people to do the same thing?
Absolutely. I would say always keep a notebook. I think people tend to take notes now on their phones. I watched this Taylor Swift documentary the other night, and she writes all her songs on her phone, and then she sings them from her phone. It feels so ephemeral, like they never become real on paper. But obviously, I'm dating myself by feeling the need to write things on paper. But I do think there's something about having the record. Like I have now rows and rows of bookshelves full of notebooks. There's something very concrete about writing them down. I would definitely encourage kids to write down ideas, and if something funny happens, to write it down. Otherwise, it'll be lost. I do encourage my kids to do the same thing. They think I'm completely nuts. They say we don't have to take notes at dinner, Mom, that we can just like have a good time and laugh. But I'm sure that's wrong.
We'll see if they come up with picture books next, or novels or memoirs.
Oh, another thing I wanted to say about picture books is they tend to be a fixed number of pages. So 32 pages is like a standard number of pages. So if you're thinking of writing a picture book, one thing that you can do is make a mock-up of 32 pages. And even if you're not going to be the artist of the book, kind of sketch out or generally what the picture might be on that page, and then put the text on each of the pages. There's probably a program, an app for this, so that you can kind of get a feel for how your book is going to unfold and what, when the certain moments have to happen. And it's a helpful tool for planning the book out and figuring out if your text is working or not. And I would say read the book out loud to as many kids as possible.
I do wonder if we have any aspiring picture book authors here. You've again covered so many things in your writing. I know we have fans logged in who are readers of many different types of your work. We have another question here from a fellow writer who says, as a working mom with a self-defined schedule, how do you fit your writing life into your personal life? Do you work at the same time every day? Are there any days you don't write? Do you set aside part of your day for social networking? From difficult to find a balance.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for asking that very good question, which I don't have a perfect answer to. I used to really like working in cafes. I don't know if you did too, but that's been one constraint of the pandemic, is not being able to I think maybe because I started working at newspapers, I like busyness in the background. I don't like things to be too quiet. So the ideal for me is sitting at a cafe table with like lots of people making noise and just kind of being there with my coffee and my thoughts for a few hours in the morning. I'm a morning worker. I never schedule any social, if I can help it, social events in the morning. I don't even schedule lunches because if I get a late start by 1 o'clock, I don't want to stop. I find that like once I stop to eat lunch or that it's really hard to get started again. I've heard that some writers take naps in the afternoon and that when they wake up after their nap, they feel refreshed in the way they feel in the morning. I've tried that a few times and it works pretty well, but I don't quite have the discipline to do it. But now I work from home. I do, fortunately, this is my home office. So I do have a door. I can, a room of my own. Actually, I share it with my husband, but I try to kick him out as much as possible. But he has a separate office. So I think the ideal for me is the kids are at school. It's morning. I've slept well. I've had my 3 cups of coffee or tea. And the biggest challenge is, as a writer, Amy, you probably know this too, is just to stay off the internet. Because that is that will just steal your life, let alone.
That's why I'm asking about the social, because as writers, we're expected to keep up with our readers on social and all this kind of stuff, but it seems like it takes so much time out of the writing day. Do you put that completely separately, or how do you handle that?
I definitely wouldn't do that before lunchtime. I don't have like a fixed amount of, it's not like I'm not Santa Claus. Like I don't get, it's not like a job in itself, but if I do that, I might do it at night or just when I know that I can't get any creative work done, when I can tell that I'm just completely frazzled and spent. But I do try to write back to people. What's weird in my position is that I often hear from people who have just had babies and who are having trouble like getting their kids to sleep through the night or starting solids, or they'll say like, you don't talk about toilet training in your book. Tell me what I should do and I'm, it's been a while since I wrote Bringing Up Bebe. And also like, I'm not a physician. I don't want to give people bad advice. So I'm quite careful about handing down advice, but at the same time, I want to, I know new moms are really stressed and really looking for somebody to like rescue them. So sometimes I send them to other books or I remind them of what's in my book, but I try to be like kind and encouraging without exceeding my area of expertise.
It's so interesting to think about the balance, and that goes for anyone because we have such a mix of people here. And again, you have such a mix of readers. We have people logged in who are 5 and people logged in who are in their 60s. And I think it's important for all of us to find a way to make some time for those projects, whether it's writing, as you're talking about, and finding a spot to write, or maybe it's drawing or music, and then how to share that. It's fascinating to hear how you've really protected your time. It sounds as if you've really made space physically and mentally and in your schedule for you to work on your creative projects.
The real thief of time is the internet.
Yeah. Good reminder. We have another question about your journalistic work. So this person says, I've seen your columns in the New York Times from time to time. Are you doing any more of this type of writing?
Yes, I am still writing columns for the New York Times. I'm also writing a column for The Economist 1843 magazine, which is also a first-person column, which has a lot to do with France, and it's also about clothes and being a woman. So I'm juggling those 2 columns, and I also write. I'm a freelance journalist, so I just did a piece for the Financial Times about how to play tennis in Paris, because I don't know if there are any tennis players out there, but I have become completely obsessed with tennis during the pandemic because for most of the time, the outdoor courts in Paris have stayed open and they're amazing. So I just play tennis as much as possible. I'm going to play this afternoon if I can.
I'll have to look out for that article.
Right, that was just a small tennis plug in the midst of
But a good reminder this time, it's good to get out and exercise and find ways to have fun as well in pandemic times, or when you're writing, when you're doing your work. We need balanced lives, right?
That's right.
Kind of the theme of Josephine's story too, I think, trying new things. And let's see, we have one more question here in the chat, and then I might be able to take one more before we let you go. You've made so much time for us already. It's wonderful. So this person says, thanks for your books that helped me so much as a French woman arrive to arrived to the USA to understand where the expectations American moms had about French moms. It was so funny. How did you work with Benjamin C? Did you work together, or did you send your text once it was written? You can just maybe tell us a little bit more about that relationship.
Sure. Well, Benjamin was somebody who I had met because I reached out to him to see if he would be interested in working on this book. So I sent him, but he doesn't live in Paris, so we communicated mostly by email and phone. By the way, he has an amazing Instagram account, so it's worth checking out, where he posts a lot of his drawings that he's doing. So I sent him the text. The text was, there was not a finished draft, but a fairly final draft. And then he came back with rough drawings, the way he envisioned the sort of breakup of the story on those 32 pages. And then from there, we sort of went back and forth and obviously worked very closely with our editor at Penguin. So yeah, it was really a collaboration. It was wonderful to work with somebody who brings so much to the conversation. It's very much about what the drawings are, very much things that he imagined. The details are things that he decided to put in there. So it was, as a writer, I'm often, as a journalist too, I'm often working by myself. It's not, I have an editor, but it's not really a collaboration. I'm just stuck with my own ideas. So it was really fun to work with somebody who's, to collaborate with somebody else, especially somebody who's that talented and whimsical, and he's just amazing.
It's a beautiful project, and I think just seeing it even digitally, that review copy we got to see, it comes across that you really had the same idea for the book, and it's a beautiful piece. I can tell that you're really happy with the choice of illustrator, and I think that comes across in the work.
Thank you. Thank you, Celeste.
Pamela, I want to thank you so much for making time to be with us. I know it sounds as if this is usually your writing time, so a special thanks for letting us eat into some of your writing time and for answering our questions. I'm so happy that we got to take a look at your book and you could tell us a little more about it. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you everyone for joining us. We're very, very happy that you could log in today. And I would like to leave everyone with a video about the library and what we do. So if you do want to type in thanks to Pamela in the chat, you can thank her for being here. And if you had any questions that you didn't get to ask, we might be able to take one more.
If any kids have questions, I'd be really happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, we would love to hear that. We're seeing mostly thanks.
Okay. And thank you, Celeste, so much. And thank you to Audrey as well for having me on. It really was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for making time for us. I'm sure we might get some questions by email, in which case I'll pass them on to you. Right now, then, we'll say farewell and thank you for being here. And those of you who want to see this little video about the library and what we do are welcome to stick around.